You doing out there, all you back cave dwellers, unknown bass player coming at you? Have you ever thought about making your own fretboard, putting the slot in it? Well, I've always wanted to have something to do that with, so I'm going to show you what I made and how I come up with it. This piece here is like an inch thick, and I actually purchased it to put shelving in the cabinets. This piece was left, so I cut it down to where I had two pieces. Had the bottom piece here. I'm going to make a miter box to cut a fretboard. Now, I actually already had used it and did this board. This is hickory. Turned out pretty decent. It's a short scale bass neck. What I done was I cut this piece in half, and actually I cut them down to 3 inches. I clamped them together. This one and this one. I clamped them together like so to make sure they were exactly the same. I had to get the holes in the same spot. I've done that before and I didn't clamp them together and drill the holes, and they come out and they weren't lined up. So I drilled the holes in them. Put these stove bolts in here. Got a 1/4 inch head right there. Took a router, put a 1/4 inch slot in here. On the other side, I glued it and just used regular drywall screws. I think I put 4 of them in there. Needed something to clamp it down to the workbench, so I just took a piece of pine, ponderosa pine here I had laying around the shop, screwed it on to the bottom. I actually come in from here. Then I notched this out so these bolts would go all the way in there. And I wanted this adjustable. That's why I done that. So this is adjustable here. I was wondering how to adjust the height, so I just decided to adjust the height by using different shims. I was actually going to put bolts through this both ways. And I thought, well, they'd have to be as much trouble because I'd have to slot them so I could move them all up and down. And then after you moved them, you had to make sure they was all even, level. So I just decided to use shims. Like this 2-inch piece of wood I used for mine, put that in there. Put the fretboard in there. Cut it. Now, I just made this out of all stuff I had around the shop here. Didn't have to buy anything. These bearings here. If you ever had a flush bit router, a router bit, they got bearings on it. I think it was a 3/16 ID on these bearings. Well, every time I've dulled one or ruined one, I saved the bearings for it. So I had these clamped together now. Took my saw. Actually, I took my buddy's saw, and this is a depth gauge here, and I removed that. Don't tell Tom though. But I removed that from the blade. like so. Now I had these two pieces clamped together. I drilled these holes down. I only had to do it on one side though, because I made the other side permanent. I glued it and screwed it down, remember. Well, with them still clamped together, like this, with them still clamped together, I put them in the vise. I took the fret saw and made a cut in it. And that's what you see right there. I cut down through there. Then I put it back into it like so. Put the bearings up against the blade itself. Used the center punch, punched them. Just took, I'm pretty sure I just used regular wood screws that had a 3/16 shaft on them. And I'm pretty sure that's what the ID was on this bearing, but I'm sure you can find something to fit your bearing you got. Put the center punch in there, screwed them in. I actually did that to both sides while they were clamped together. So now the saw actually goes in here and rides against those bearings, which keeps it straight. Now you'd have to experiment with, take the thickness of your fretboard and how deep. That's, I think this saw is a 23 thousandths, the Tang's 23 thousandths slot. You put the shim in there. Let me go get a couple pieces I experimented with. An old piece of rosewood was going to be a fretboard. With my skills and abilities, I messed it up, so this was, now it's firewood. But you get the shim up to how deep you want to cut, because the saw is going to come down and stop when it hits these bearings. It's not going any further than the lip on that saw. That's the way I designed it. So it's going to come right against this lip here, and that's going to stop the depth. So in order to get them all the same every time, you take something, experiment with it, you put it on there, bring the saw down to the depth you want cut on your board, and make sure it stops here when it hits, and then you got the right depth every time you do it. You mark out your fretboard. There's all kinds of places you can get the scales, and might even find one laid out on the computer you can print out and just lay it on the board. I don't know, but lay that on there, get the depth set, just move it every time to that slot lines up with your where you want your cut or you want your fret, and go down to it. Put your blade in here. Let's see if I can get in here. And then that'll stop right there. That piece, that brass piece, will lay right on that bearing. The bearings will keep it straight and allow it to slide. Now I put this on here because I after I had made it, I needed a place. I got to be able to clamp this thing down. So instead of redoing it, I just screwed and glued this piece onto it. Now I screw this down or clamp. I actually clamp mine, but you could put a wood screw into your, or a drywall screw into your workbench, or I take a C-clamp and clamp mine down at the end of the workbench. Does a good job. Cost me absolutely nothing. Just made it out of scrap I had around here, and this is the board I done on a piece of hickory. I actually had the neck together, it was looking pretty good. But then someone knocked it off the workbench. Uh-oh. This happened. I tried to dowel it, but no success. I'm going to have to make another one. But live and learn. That's the way life goes. If you like this small video, like and subscribe. Thank you.